Hello, I'm Alexandra Caldwell-Wenman. I'm a director of product management for Tableau at Salesforce. And today we're going to be talking about the core competencies of product management. Product managers have a variety of different responsibilities depending on the industry that they're part of, the size of their organization, the organizational structure that they have in place. For example, large organizations may have additional resources that help you engage with customers, or particular processes that they have in place to help many teams collaborate and organize with each other. Whereas smaller companies and startups may be able to move a lot faster and may have different resources that are available to them. However, regardless of the part of the organization that you're a part of or the industry, there are certain core competencies that are valuable to all product managers, regardless of your role or your organization. And so that's where we're going to be spending some of our time today. We'll talk about getting to know your customers, experimentation and data and how those can be useful to you, learning a little bit about your business and your industry, and then also just the value of having a continuously learning mindset. So before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about my journey. I used to own a clothing company called Lex. And I bring this up as a way to kind of illustrate that product managers come from a wide variety of different areas and industries and disciplines. Some are completely new to the industry that they're a part of. Some are already a part of tech companies, but maybe are transitioning from support or sales. So there's not necessarily like one path to becoming a product manager. There's a lot of different paths for becoming a product manager. My first role within a tech organization was at Intuit. I was in charge of first-time use and retention for QuickBooks Payroll. And while I was at Intuit, I learned a lot about customer discovery, being very customer-backed, developing deep customer empathy. It's a huge part of the DNA at Intuit. And so those were huge things for me to learn at that point. After that, I went to a startup called When I Work. When I Work helps hourly workers to schedule their employees, allow their employees to trade and drop shifts. And it was also just a really great opportunity to see what is life like at a startup, because it's very different from a very large organization. Again, the resources that you have, the way that things work can be very different. So it was an interesting experience to see from that perspective as well. After that, I joined a company called DataSite. DataSite facilitates M&A transactions. So, for example, when one company wants to buy another or has a high-value asset that they want to buy or sell, DataSite helps to facilitate those kinds of transactions. And I also was really lucky to join at a time when DataSite was going through an organizational transformation. Where they had done all kinds of things and were really now focusing on becoming a tech company. And so I joined at a point when they were moving from like a very small, lean, fast, nimble startup, and was a part of as they were developing the rigor and the growth of becoming a much more medium-sized technology company with embedded processes. And so that was a really great experience to be a part of as well. And currently I am at Tableau at Salesforce. I'm responsible for strategic initiatives and upgrades as a part of our core engineering team. And again, it's a really great, interesting experience to see how product management is done at what I would call like a medium to large size company, that's Tableau, but also within this much larger, massive organization that is Salesforce. And so I've gotten the chance to kind of see what does product management look like across different industries, across big companies, small companies, different regions of the country, global companies, much more national companies. It's really been a really interesting experience to see from a lot of different angles. So today, the things that we're going to focus on are four major competencies, because these are going to apply regardless of where you are or regardless of your role, really. And the first one, and probably the most important, is really that everything starts and ends with your customer. Having a really strong knowledge base about your customer, having deep customer empathy is going to be probably your most valuable tool, because that is the thing that you can always go back to let you know that you're on the right track, to figure out if you're building the right things, what's going to be valuable ultimately for your company, because your customers are going to be the ones who have to pay you. So that becomes kind of like your North Star. Also, the thing that's going to become like your best friend is rapid experimentation and data. Those are really great ways to essentially make decisions very quickly and to figure out if how do you want to do the thing that you're aiming to do in as cheap a way as possible, so that basically you end up with the right solution faster and spend less money doing it. It becomes really valuable to learn your business as well, knowing things about your products, your services, how your organization fits within its industry. Those all become incredibly valuable to you. And then finally, having a continuously learning mindset, being able to say that you're always learning and being able to take value out of that. So everything starts and ends with your customer, as I mentioned. It's really valuable to learn about their business. What is it that your customer is trying to do? Learn about their industry. What is the culture of their industry like? Is there particular processes or ways that they're going to behave or expect a solution to work simply because of the way their industry works? It's really valuable to also learn how do they do their work. So for example, if you are already if they're already your customer and you have a solution for them, how are they using it? How does it work for them? If you're hoping that they become your customer and they haven't used you yet, what are they doing now? If they have a problem or they're trying to accomplish some goal, they have something that they're doing today. What is that? And where do they have pain and things where you can bring value to that process? And then also, really learn about their feelings and their motivations. And I have a really interesting story about this, but we'll come back to that in a second. But this becomes incredibly valuable as you interpret the information that they're giving you. So at Intuit, one of the things that we used to do were called follow me homes. And it's really embedded into the culture of Intuit, where it started where people would see customers buy a box of QuickBooks and they would actually follow them out to the parking lot and ask them if they could watch them install it. By the time I was there, we were not following customers out into the parking lot, but we did try and go to customers' businesses on site to watch them use our products, to learn how they interacted with them. And just having that customer-backed experience as a part of everything we did became really valuable. And then as I was working at Intuit, we discovered that we had a set of onboarding experiences or experiences where customers were selecting their products that was not optimal. They actually were really upset about it. But taking that really customer-backed approach and looking at the feedback that they were giving us in our various support channels and across other channels, it really became impressioned upon me how much that if you listen to your customers, they will tell you what they do not like. And they will also tell you what they would like to have in place or what they would like you to do to fix it. And so it was almost like our customers had created kind of like a path for me to follow, and all I had to do was walk down it. So it really makes your job much, much easier. At DataSite, we took this same customer-backed approach, but rather than using it to necessarily fix a problem, we looked at how do we take a new product to market from concept all the way to launch. So for example, when I joined, we had one product that we were building. I was a part of that process, but then we said, well, how do we scale this out into an ecosystem? How do we provide more solutions for more of our customers? And so we took an idea and we took that idea of going out, doing customer discovery, and getting feedback around like what kinds of solution would make sense to them. Would they interact with a product if it worked a particular way? So we'll talk about prototyping in a little bit too. All the way to, okay, if you have this particular solution, how much would you expect to pay for it? How would you onboard the rest of your organization so that you can use it as a team and it becomes embedded within your organization? How would you expect it to be licensed? And so all the way from that very beginning concept stage, all the way through to we now have a product that we've built. We're giving it to an early set of customers as reference customers, all the way through a fully fledged product out in the market and being customer backed the entire time. Throughout this whole thing where you're customer backed, it becomes really important to get out of the building, to spend as much time talking to your customers as possible, to really listen to them, And then to learn as much as you possibly can, because as I said, that becomes like your North Star. And so they become kind of like your guideposts of which direction you should be going. And also part of the magic of this process is interpreting what your customers are telling you. So sometimes it is not literal. Sometimes you kind of have to piece different parts of the story together. So going back to those follow me homes and learning about your customers' feelings and motivations, one of the stories that is really interesting to me from very early on in my career into it was we went to a customer's office and we were going to watch them with their QuickBooks, but then also as they were doing their payroll. And it was really interesting because they had this beige box in the corner of their office. And they were like, that's where we keep our accounting software. It is not on the internet. That's why we have such an old computer that this is what's running it. They were really, really concerned about letting things on the internet. And they were like, we absolutely don't want the internet to touch it at all. But then at the same time, we're watching them run payroll through our online payroll solution, which pulls its information from their accounting. And so even though they were saying very seemingly explicitly that we don't want things to be on the internet, they clearly had a comfort level with the internet on some level. So really what they were telling us was less about don't put things on the internet, but much more like we have a fear around certain things that we don't understand. And we need to essentially have those fears soothed and be comforted if this is the process that we're going to go down. And so it becomes, again, learning the feelings and motivations of your customers and being really customer backed throughout everything that you're doing is going to be incredibly helpful and valuable to you. So let's talk about rapid experimentation and data a little bit, because that is part of the way that you can take some of that customer backed learnings and pull them into your decision making. So the goal of rapid experimentation and leveraging data is really to learn as much as you can as quickly as possible with as little investment as you can. So you want to learn, you want it to be fast, and you don't want to spend a lot of money to do it. And as you're going through this, it can be used to help you learn about your customers. So some of the things that we just talked about. It also can be used to validate your product. Is the product that you've built the right one, or is the solution going to make sense for people? It can be used to validate your market. Are you in the right space? Is this the right segment of your customers to be targeting? And then also just targeting specific business decisions. So oftentimes what I'll run into is we'll be in like a group conversation where we'll have a couple of different options on how we might want to approach something. And it becomes, how can we experiment and test really quickly? And then also, how do you go through this process and prevent costly mistakes? And we'll talk about that more in depth in a second as well. Throughout this, one of the things that, well, over here on the left, my left is Samuel. And I think Samuel is probably the first customer that I ever did a rapid experimentation with. While I was at Intuit, they're really big on lean prototyping, getting out and talking to your customers as quickly as possible to validate things, sometimes with very, very lean prototypes. So I was a part of a group that was tasked with, if you were to build a new solution and take it to market, what would that solution be? And how do you validate it with customers? And we were given an afternoon to figure it out. And so rather than building out something and then putting it in front of customers to physically play with, because we weren't going to have the time to do that, we mocked up essentially like a web page and put it on an iPad, and then took it out into the world and showed it to people like Samuel. And we didn't necessarily like give them the iPad to touch and play with because it was fake, but we did explain like, hey, if you had something like this, what would you expect it to do? Where would you get value out of it? And then also with the aim of like, hey, do you want to give us your email and we'll let you know when this is available? Other teams actually got people to give them like business cards or small amounts of money, like $1, to say that, yeah, I want to have a place held for something. And so it was a way to be very lean and just get a sense of, are we going the right direction? Going back to that, learning as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. That way you can figure out if you keep going down that same path or if you need to pivot and make adjustments. When I was at When I Work, we had a much smaller product team, and we had a lot more analysts who were available to help us, data analysts. And so we spent a lot more time on like A/B testing and multivariate testing because they had built out specific tools for us to use for that. So if we had questions around maybe like a growth funnel or an onboarding experience, one of the ways that we would solve them is like, let's quickly mock up two things that are going to allow people to kind of click through and put them out in the world and see which one wins. And it worked for us because we had those tools and resources readily available. We didn't have some of the resources that Intuit had to be able to kind of source customers. And then at Tableau, as we're looking at this, we tend to deal with data in much larger sets. So rather than talking to maybe a handful of customers or pulling information that way, we'll look at how can we take all of the customer data that's come through for support, for example, or how do we take a data set from like 1,500 customers and pull that together into a meaningful insight that's going to give us some direction on which way do we want to go. And so the point of these, as I kind of give you these little examples, is that the way that you go about doing this, or the approach that might be considered correct, is not necessarily one size fits all. The right way of doing it is going to be the one that gets you the information you need as quickly as you can and as cheaply as you can. But again, all of this helps you to kind of let you know that you're on the right path and to avoid making costly mistakes. One of the kind of best examples that I have of the way that it can help you to avoid making costly mistakes was while I was at DataSite. We had a particular feature that we suspected would be highly valuable to customers, but we weren't necessarily sure on the right approach for it because it wasn't, it was a feature that existed in the marketplace in other products, but we knew that people didn't necessarily like those. So we made our best first approach, took a prototype out to some customers and said, okay, if it works like this, how would you feel about it? Would you use it? And we pretty much got a resounding, like, it's interesting. We do need something like that. We don't want to do that much manual overhead. And so we said, okay, that's not the right solution. We'll do another pass at this. And at that point, we really thought, okay, we are very clever. We have spent a lot of time thinking about this. We're going to figure out the perfect solution. We're going to take it out to customers. This is definitely the one. They're going to be so shocked at how wonderful and amazing this is. Well, it turns out that they were not shocked at how wonderful and amazing it was. We thought we were very clever and they felt a little bit confused about it. And so we kind of had to take that back and say, okay, we thought that we had it right. We did not. We'll iterate and figure out another way of doing this because we now know that it's valuable to customers. And we now know some ways that this should not be done. And we were able to get feedback out of both of those first two iterations. So then in our third iteration, we said, okay, we now know that this needs to be much more flexible than either of the first two approaches that we took. So we put together a third prototype, took it out to customers to share with them. And then at that point, customers were really excited about it. They were like, yes, we would like to use this. In fact, we want you to show this to other members of our team. We'd start to get questions about when will it be available? And so that's really kind of when you know that you've hit on the right spot. When you test and you experiment, when you show people prototypes or you run like A/B test or whatever your experimentation method might be, and you really start to see like excited customer engagement, because at that point, you know, okay, you have a winning solution. You have something that you can really move forward with. And doing those three prototypes for us helped us to arrive at the right solution without building something and spending a lot of money and time and resources that customers were just not going to be excited about. So for us, it was a huge win. The third one that we'll talk a little bit about is learning your business. And so as a part of this experience, or as a part of this process of being a product manager, it becomes really important to learn the products and services that you have available to you or as a part of your solution set. And this is probably the most important part of learning your business. There's an incredible amount of competency and artistry that comes from knowing the ins and outs of your product. So for example, how it works, It's kind of it seems like the most obvious piece, but some products are very complicated. So knowing how it works becomes very important. It's also really valuable to understand how your product came to be that way and why it is that way. So for example, if you've come into a product that you didn't build, it can be really valuable to go back and say, okay, who was around that knew how this came to be? Because there's usually a reason for why things are set up the way that they are, or just some direction that can help you. When I was at DataSite, again, I was lucky enough to come in a transitional period where I was a part of the first group that rebuilt our initial product. So I became very, very familiar with the ins and outs of that product, and then was a part of subsequent products as we built those out and took those to market. So over the course of my time there, and I was there for a fair number of years, there was very little about the app or different products that I didn't know, but having that benefit of knowledge about how it works, how customers could use it, became incredibly valuable as I spent time talking to customers, because you can help them through interesting hurdles and navigate different things. It also allows you to take kind of a different approach to potential solutions and what might exist, because you kind of know where the potholes are and where the slipstreams are, and can kind of see some of the benefits and piece things together in a way that someone who's less familiar with the product is not going to be able to. It also becomes really valuable to understand your organization's goals. So what is your organization trying to do? What is your team trying to accomplish? It really helps you as you're figuring out your role and the things that you're trying to orient towards to make sure that they match. Because that way you have a little bit of a guiding North Star in respect to that. It also becomes really valuable to understand the preferred communication styles at your organization. There are some teams and organizations that prefer to communicate via presentations and PowerPoints. Some like to have written documentation. Some people like Slack. Some people prefer more of a face-to-face video communication style. But this becomes really important because after you've become an expert on your customer, you know the most probably about your customer and their needs and the things that they're going to need as anyone can within your team and your organization. And so as you ask for other people to kind of help your team or help your organization, it gives you a way to communicate the knowledge that you've got with those other teams and those other parts of the organization. That way, when you show up and you say, our customer needs X and here's why, you have a really clear and articulate way of being able to express that in a way that someone else can understand without having to necessarily rehash it 3 or 4 times. So it makes you more efficient and a little bit faster. And then finally, it becomes really valuable to understand your industry and where you are in the industry as well. And this will change a little bit depending on the organization that you're a part of. So if you're a part of a startup, understanding what are the competitors doing and where are those opportunities for you to kind of wedge your way in becomes really valuable. If you're a much larger organization, understanding even if there are many small competitors that you consider ankle biters, understanding where they are and what they're doing helps to kind of help you defend against them. Also prevent disruption. So it just becomes really valuable to understand about your industry as well. So the third kind of real big learning piece, I think, as a product manager is really learning your business. And then finally, there's just really this element of having a continually learning mindset that's going to be very valuable for you. Very early in my career, an executive that I admire gave a presentation about her career journey. But what stuck with me was that it was not about the roles that she had or the different jobs that she had. It was about the things that she learned along the way, because she could transfer them throughout her career and keep going back to them, which was really valuable. So for example, early in your career or at a new job, it's very clear that you have stuff to learn, that there's a learning curve for you. But even after you've been someplace for several years or are seemingly an expert in a space, it becomes valuable to still keep that learning mindset simply because things change. So, for example, there may be external factors like COVID and everyone goes home to work that may play a factor in not only how you do your job, but maybe potentially how your industry or your company or your products get used. Also, some industries and companies have significant generational changes and things that are going to impact them as time goes on. So, for example, amongst small business customers, there were certain segments of the population that really didn't have an interest in doing things in a digital way or doing things online. They were happy with their pen and paper method that they had been doing for a really long time. But then, as those businesses either turned over to other employees or as new people came into the space, those things would change and where people would go, I really do want a digital solution. In fact, I want to be able to do it from my phone on a beach in Hawaii. And so the expectations of what you can provide for your customers and what they're going to see as valuable, those change over time. It also may be that new technologies come into the space, things that weren't possible before become possible. And so just always being able to look and say, okay, I want to keep learning about what's going on becomes incredibly valuable for you. And basically, all of that practice, that learning is going to help you as you carry through your career, either if you're staying at the same organization or changing organizations or roles, it just carries through and becomes really, really valuable for you. So we'll kind of do a retake of the things that we've talked about so far. The first of which is that everything really starts and ends with your customer. You want to develop a strong knowledge of them, develop deep customer empathy, really become the expert on everything that they're doing, because their work and the things that they find valuable are going to really become your guiding North Star as you're navigating through product management. It also becomes really valuable to experiment and use data. Again, the goal is to learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can, with minimal investment. So as you're making decisions based on what your customers are telling you, this can become a guidepost of how do you go about the decision-making process. And again, there's a lot of ways to experiment and use data. So the right way is going to be the one that helps you answer the questions you need answered as quickly as possible, based on the resources that you have. There's not necessarily one right way to do this. It also becomes really valuable to learn your business, what makes your business tick, what's valuable to your stakeholders. How does your product work? Again, the product and learning your product is incredibly helpful. How do you communicate with the different parts of your organization so that they can understand what your customers are telling you and the decisions that you're making based on your experimentation and your data? And then also just maintaining that learning mindset. That way you're continuously learning and able to take in all of the new information that's going to be available for you as you're going throughout your careers. So I'll thank you. If you guys have any questions, I hope this was incredibly helpful to you. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I hope you enjoy your day.